I was tracing lines on a garden sketch when the doorbell cut through the quiet. It was one of those sharp, impatient rings that makes you straighten your back before you even reach the door. Retirement had taught me to appreciate silence, but I recognized that kind of knock. It belonged to someone who wanted something. On the porch stood my son Lucas. His smile looked borrowed. Beside him was a woman whose confidence arrived before her name. She rested her hand on his arm like she was making a public announcement. "Dad, this is Alina," he said, breathless. "We're engaged." "Engaged," I repeated. He nodded eagerly. "We wanted you to be the first to know." I stepped aside. "Come in, then." Alina's eyes swept across the hallway the moment she crossed the threshold, the crown molding the walnut rail, the original floors I'd refinished by hand. Her gaze wasn't admiration. It was calculation. "This home has such integrity," she said smoothly. "They don't build them like this anymore." "Built in 1923, I said. "Ah, of course," she replied. "That explains the craftsmanship." We moved into the living room. Lucas was talking fast about how they'd met at a real estate seminar, how she consulted for luxury clients, how it just clicked. She added that she managed high-value portfolios and estate transitions. She said high value 3 times in 5 minutes. I offered coffee. While I boiled water, I could hear her voice drifting from the other room asking about the lot size neighborhood development market trends. She spoke like a surveyor measuring the walls before signing a contract. When I came back with the tray, I asked, "So how did you two meet?" Lucas told the story like a romantic movie trailer. "I was giving a talk on sustainable housing. She was in the audience. Afterward, we talked for hours." Alina smiled. "Lucas is one of the few people in real estate who actually cares about ethics, not just profit." "Where's your family from?" I asked. "Seattle," she said quickly. "But we're not close. I prefer looking forward." Then with a polite smile, Lucas tells me, "You're something of a legend. Here designed half the buildings downtown." "Functional ones," I corrected. She laughed softly and leaned closer. "That's even better. Beauty fades. Function lasts." Her words sounded rehearsed, as if she'd spent the car ride practicing them. Lucas set his cup down. "Actually, Dad, Alina suggested something smart, a prenuptial agreement. Just transparency and protection for both of us." He handed me the papers like they were a trophy. I took my glasses from the table and read. The document was thick, neatly printed, far too professional to be just an idea. Clause 7 caught my attention. All family assets acquired during marriage are subject to equal division. Family assets not marital. Clause 12. Inheritance received during marriage becomes shared property after 12 months. I looked up. "Did you have your own lawyer review this, Lucas?" "Dad, it's fair," he said. "Alina's just being practical." "Every contract deserves 2 signatures and 2 lawyers," I replied. He frowned. She placed a hand on his shoulder, gentle guiding. "Would you like to show me the rest of the house?" she asked me. I adore this era's design. We toured each room. She took photos on her phone for inspiration, she said. But I noticed her angles, the kitchen layout, my study doors, the security keypad. She stopped by the bedroom window overlooking the garden. "Such a large property for one person," she murmured. "Have you thought about what happens to it?" "Eventually. Eventually is far away," I said. "Of course," she said brightly. "But it's wise to discuss these things early. Lucas told me you haven't updated your will since your wife passed." "Did he?" My tone cooled. She hesitated just long enough to register my shift. "I only meant estate planning avoids future misunderstandings. I prefer avoiding misunderstandings now." At the door when they left, she hugged me the kind of hug people give when they want to control the ending. "I'm so glad we'll be family," she whispered. The emphasis on family wasn't warmth. It was ownership. When the car drove away, I stood in the hallway listening to the silence refill the house. Then I went to my study, spread the contract on my desk, and took notes in pencil old habit. I circled Clause 12, underlined Clause 7, and wrote one word beside them: why. The following weeks passed with polite, predictable normalcy. Lucas called every few days to talk about venues and color palettes. He sounded happy, or maybe determined to sound happy. The contract sat in my drawer, but the unease didn't. One afternoon, my old colleague Robert asked to meet for lunch at a restaurant downtown. It was a converted warehouse, brick walls, soft jazz, the kind of place where architects feel nostalgic. I arrived early. While I scanned, the menu movement near the bar caught my eye. Alina. She sat at a corner table, half hidden by a column. Across from her was a man in a tailored gray suit, confident posture, no wedding ring. They leaned toward each other with the kind of familiarity that doesn't come from business. She touched his hand. He smiled. I froze. Then reason spoke. One lunch doesn't prove betrayal. Still, I asked the waiter if I could move to a table with better light. From the new angle behind a potted fern, I had a clear line of sight. For 20 minutes, I watched quietly the same patients I'd used reviewing blueprints. They shared a dessert, laughed at something private left separately. When the man walked out, I followed at a distance. He got into a black sedan. I memorized the license plate and wrote it down before I even started my engine. Back home, I called an old acquaintance, a journalist named Carter, who owed me a favor. "Can you run a plate for me?" I asked. He hesitated. "That's not my usual line of work, Martin. Just information," I said, "not trouble." 30 minutes later, he called back. Adrian Cole, realtor, works luxury properties. I hung up and sat at my desk. My study felt smaller. The contract drawer, the photograph in my mind, the tone in Alina's voice, all of it was forming a design. I pulled a fresh notebook from the shelf. Date, time, observations, possible motive. I wrote everything down as if preparing for a trial I hadn't yet been accused of. That night, Lucas called again. "Alina wants to invite you for brunch. She really wants you to like her." Of course, I said, "Tell her I'm looking forward to it." 2 days later, she was at my door with fresh pastries and the same perfume from that restaurant. We sat by the window. She smiled and said, "Lucas told me your will might need updating. I could recommend someone discreet." I smiled back. "You really think of everything. I just want to make sure the transition between generations is smooth," she said. "Transition," I repeated. "Interesting word?" She laughed. "Just practicality, Mr. Hale. You architects think about structure. I think about security." When they left, I opened my notebook and wrote down her exact sentence. "You architects think about structure. I think about security." For the first time in my life, I wished I didn't understand how right she might be. 2 days after Alina's brunch visit, I admitted something to myself. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a structure carefully drawn. When you've spent 40 years inspecting foundations, you know when something looks stable but isn't. Alina's words, her precision, the timing, none of it was coincidence. So I began my own design quiet investigation. I met Carter, the journalist, who'd once owed me a favor. "The man she had lunch with," I said. "Adrian Cole. Find out who he is." Carter nodded. 2 hours later, he called back. "Adrian Cole, real estate agent, Premier Estates Northwest, sells multi-million-dollar homes." That night, I sat in my study with the old architect's lamp glowing above the desk. Her words from brunch echoed, "Families like ours, transition between generations." It wasn't romance, it was acquisition. The next morning, I hired a private investigator named Marcus Dale. His office was a box of gray walls and filing cabinets, perfect for secrets. "I need background," I told him. "My son's fiancée. Full report, finances, relationships, legal records." He listened without expression. 2 weeks. You'll get everything." Those 2 weeks moved like concrete settings, slowly, painfully. I kept pretending everything was fine. Alina called more often, always polite, always circling back to money. "Have you thought about downsizing, Martin?" she asked one afternoon. "Lucas and I could buy the house from you. Keep it in the family." "In the family," I repeated, smiling thinly. When she left, I wrote her words in my notebook. Phase 2, testing boundaries. 2 weeks later, Dale called. "Your instincts were right. You should come in." His office smelled like printer paper and coffee that had died hours ago. He handed me a thick folder. "You'll want to sit down." Inside were photographs, legal documents, and timelines. Alina Cross, not Quinn. 2 previous marriages, both short. First husband, Kevin Morse, Seattle tech consultant. Second, Richard Brenner, San Francisco investor. Each ended the same way, quick divorce, heavy settlement. $180,000 from one, $220,000 from the other. And now, Adrian Cole. Another man in her orbit, same pattern, charm, financial access, disappearance. She's done this before, Dale said, each time cleaner than the last. I looked at the final page photos of her and Cole leaving a hotel. My throat tightened. She's already married my son in her mind, I said quietly. What now? He asked. I protect him, but timing matters. She's skilled. If I go too early, she'll turn it against me. He nodded. Then we build evidence like you'd build a house. Solid foundation first. That night, I spread the documents across the dining table. My late wife's candle holders reflected the lamplight over pages of deceit. I realized something cruel. I was redesigning my son's future the way I once redesigned broken buildings. The next morning, I called attorney Patricia Wynn, recommended by a colleague. Her office was a renovated Victorian with clean white walls and calm energy. She studied Dale's report. This woman's pattern is classic financial fraud, Patricia said. The prenup is a trap note, clause 7 and 12. After a year of marriage, she's entitled to a share of inherited assets. That's not coincidence. That's targeting. What do I do? You need witnesses, she said, the ex-husbands. Their statements can prove a repeated scheme. We'll void the prenup on grounds of fraud. Her tone was firm like a blueprint drawn in ink. Don't confront your son yet. Build quietly. Document everything. Let her believe she's winning. I left her office with a new plan evidence first revelation later. Dale found the first ex-husband within a week. Kevin Morse still in Seattle, still cautious. He won't talk to me, Dale said, but he'll meet you. So I drove north. The road was wet with early spring rain. I passed places I'd once shown Lucas as a boy, the bridges, the forests, the quiet roads, all of it felt heavier now. Kevin met me in a quiet cafe on Capitol Hill. When I introduced myself, he hesitated, then said, "She's engaged again." To my son, I said. He shook his head slowly. She doesn't change the pattern, only the name. For an hour, he told me everything. How she'd studied him before they met, how she knew his income, his inheritance, even the timing of his father's passing. She made me believe I was the first man who ever truly saw her, he said. Then the prenup. She called it protection. I didn't realize it protected only her. He described the moment he confronted her about another man. She didn't cry, she smiled, like she'd just closed a deal. I asked him for a statement. He didn't hesitate. If it saves someone else, yes. He typed it right there on his laptop, a detailed, dated account of her manipulation, financial extraction, and emotional tactics. When he signed it, I felt the first piece of structure settle into place. Before leaving, Kevin said one more thing. She isolates them. Slowly. You'll think your son is drifting away by choice. He's not. She's building a wall around him, and you're on the outside. He was right. The next 3 weeks proved it. Lucas canceled our usual Sunday dinners once, twice, then every week. His messages grew shorter. We're busy with planning. Alina's family is visiting. Let's catch up later. Each one felt like another brick between us. But while she built her illusion, I built my file. I printed Kevin's statement, added Dale's surveillance photos, financial reports, and the full prenup draft. Each document went into a labeled folder, timeline, motive pattern. At night, I studied them the way I used to study blueprints before a presentation, checking every angle, every joint, every weakness. One evening, staring at the wall of evidence, I whispered, "You build walls, Alina. I build exits." The house was quiet except for rain against the windows. I took one final note before turning out the light. Next step, proof she can't explain. The architect in me wanted precision. The father in me wanted mercy. But mercy has no place when your child's future is being auctioned off. So I did what builders do best. I prepared for demolition. By mid-June, the silence had changed its tone. Lucas no longer called without reason. Our Sunday dinners, a ritual that had survived college jobs. Even my heart surgery vanished, one polite excuse at a time. "Sorry, Dad, Alina's family's in town. Next week venue issues were swamped. By the third cancellation, I stopped asking." She was doing exactly what Kevin had warned me about: isolation by kindness. Step by step, she was moving me from family to outsider. Still, I stayed calm. Patricia, my attorney, had been clear: don't confront, don't show your hand, keep collecting. So I turned the guest bedroom into what I started calling the command center. A corkboard filled the wall: photos, timelines, receipts, legal notes. At the center was Alina's picture from their engagement announcement, surrounded by strings connecting her to Adrian Cole, Kevin Morse, and every suspicious transaction in between. It looked obsessive. Maybe it was. But I'd learned from architecture that obsession is what keeps buildings standing. Then one evening I received the call I'd been waiting for. Mr. Hale Dale said the second ex-husband surfaced. Richard Brenner. San Francisco. Not eager to talk, but when I mentioned your son's name, he asked for your number. Richard called the next day. His voice was quiet, even careful. She's engaged again, he asked. Yes, I said. To my son. He sighed. I knew she'd try again. She's good, terrifyingly good. He told me about the same pattern: whirlwind courtship, emotional intensity, early discussions about security and transparency. He, too, signed a prenup with nearly identical clauses. Within 2 years, he lost his house in mediation and wrote her a check to make the nightmare stop. Before hanging up, he said, "If you ever get her in court, I'll testify. But please, Mr. Hale, don't underestimate her. She's charming until she's cornered." That sentence stayed with me. Until she's cornered. By early July, the tension had become visible. Lucas's tone on the phone was defensive, brittle. Dad, Alina says you're being distant. Am I? She feels like you're testing her, asking strange questions. Questions like what? She mentioned you brought up estate planning again. I only answered hers, I said. He paused, then sighed. Dad, she thinks maybe you're having trouble letting go. It was like hearing my son read lines written by someone else. Lucas, I said softly, you know me better than that. He hesitated. Yeah, I do. But maybe we take a little space until after the wedding. Less stress for everyone. Of course, I said, even though I felt something collapse inside me. When the call ended, I wrote the phrase in my notebook, Stage 3, complete isolation achieved. I stared at those words for a long time before turning off the light. The next morning, I met Patricia again. She studied the new materials Dale had gathered, the statements from both ex-husbands' surveillance photos of Alina and Adrian Cole, the transcripts of our conversations. She's tightening control, Patricia said. Classic tactic. She needs to discredit you before the wedding, so if you reveal anything later, she can say you were paranoid. Can I show Lucas the proof now, I asked. She shook her head. No, not yet. Half the truth is easier to deny than the whole thing. You need overwhelming evidence presented at a moment she can't spin. When the wedding itself, she said, that's when her guard will drop. Everyone will assume she's already won. I didn't like it, the idea of waiting while my son walked toward disaster, but she was right. Timing was everything. So I prepared quietly. I bought a small voice recorder, voice-activated, nearly invisible, and began documenting every conversation with Alina and Lucas. Oregon's one-party consent law made it legal, though it didn't make it pleasant. At our next brunch, I kept the device in my shirt pocket. Alina arrived with fresh pastries and her usual politeness. Martin, she said sweetly, Lucas told me you haven't updated your insurance. You should add him as a beneficiary. It's the responsible thing. I smiled. I'll think about it. Please do, she said. These things prevent chaos later. Families thrive when they plan ahead. I nodded, pretending not to hear the ownership in her tone. When they left, I uploaded the recording, transcribed her words, and highlighted phrases like beneficiary, plan ahead, prevent chaos. A pattern was emerging: emotional warmth masking financial interest. 2 days later, Dale called again. She met with Adrian Cole yesterday, downtown Marriott, room 847, 3 hours. My jaw tightened. You got anything? Not photos inside, he said, but I left an audio device near the door. You'll want to hear it. He emailed the file. That night, I sat alone in my study with headphones on, listening to the faint hum of hallway noise, footsteps, and elevator laughter, then her voice. Alina, 10 more weeks of this charade, she said. Then the prenup activates. A man's voice, Adrian's. And the father. Handled, she replied. He can suspect whatever he wants. Lucas won't believe him. They both laughed. I stopped the recording halfway. The anger that filled me wasn't loud. It was precise, cold, like steel reinforcement beneath concrete. The next day I called Patricia. I have it, I said. Her voice. Everything she's planning. Good, she said. Now secure it. Back up every file. Lock one copy off-site. I did. One hard drive in my safe, another with Patricia. I labeled the folder The Truth August 16. Over the next weeks, I played my role perfectly, the tired old father finally giving up. I stopped asking questions. I even complimented Alina's wedding vision. Her demeanor changed. She started calling me by my first name again, friendly, relaxed, convinced she'd neutralized me. Lucas texted one night, "Thanks for being supportive, Dad. It means a lot." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Always, son, always." But every time I looked at his message, I thought of the recording. He actually believes I love him. It wasn't just fraud. It was cruelty rehearsed as affection. Late July came. Dale's final report arrived, more photos, more evidence. Alina and Adrian still met secretly, though less often. They were careful now, but not enough. Each meeting added another time-stamped nail to her own undoing. I printed every image, labeled every conversation, organized every file into an evidence binder, neat, logical, irrefutable. Then I stopped sleeping. Every night I'd walk past the guest room and glance at the command board. The strings between faces, dates, and lies had become a map of deceit. But in that chaos, I saw structure, and in structure, I saw my way out. She was building a trap. I was building the countermeasure. I knew how this would end, I just didn't know how much it would hurt to get there. The wedding date, August 16th, was circled in red ink at the center of the board. Underneath, I wrote, "Let her think she's won. Then pull the foundation." The morning of the wedding felt too calm. No rain, no wind, just Portland's pale sky hanging above the city like it was waiting for something to crack. I woke early, ironed my suit, and checked the folder for the 100th time. Inside was everything: witness statements, surveillance photos, financial reports, and at the very back a transcript labeled hotel recording May 27th. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. Light as paper, heavy as truth. Before leaving, I looked around the house. The old portraits, the creak in the hallway, the silence that had become my closest ally. "We end it today," I said quietly. Brookside Country Club stood on a hill lined with bright hydrangeas. Cars glittered in the driveway. The guest list looked expensive. I arrived an hour early, as I always had before any big presentation. An architect's instinct: know the structure before you stand inside it. The ceremony area was perfectly staged: white chairs, a floral arch, a rented string quartet. Alina's attention to detail was impressive, but so were most frauds. Guests arrived in waves. Alina's side filled quickly, all dressed to impress. Lucas's side was smaller, a few of his co-workers, an old friend from college, me. That imbalance told its own story. At 3 o'clock, the music began. Alina appeared at the top of the aisle in a gown that could have paid off a mortgage. She smiled, confident, radiant, utterly sure of her victory. When she reached Lucas, he looked overwhelmed, nervous, yes, but also proud. I remembered him as a boy holding up his first model airplane, proud then, too. The officiant's voice blurred. I caught fragments: honor, cherish, truth. Words that meant nothing in her mouth. When the applause came, I didn't clap. I pressed the small recorder in my pocket, the same one that had captured her lies, and whispered to myself, "Now we build the collapse." The reception followed in a ballroom of glass chandeliers and champagne laughter. I stayed at my assigned table, far from the head. She'd done that on purpose. Control seating, control sight lines, smart. After dinner, the DJ announced the toasts. "We'll begin with the bride's family," he said cheerfully. "Then the father of the groom." Alina rose to speak first. Her voice was smooth, her tone polished. She thanked everyone, praised Lucas, then glanced at me. "And thank you, Martin," she said sweetly. "You raised a wonderful son. Your job is done now. It's our turn to build a future." Polite laughter. I smiled back, though she didn't see what was behind it. When she sat, she leaned close enough to whisper, "You can leave now. You've been here long enough." I looked at her calmly. "You're right, I am leaving, but not alone." Her smile faltered. The DJ's voice echoed, and now a few words from the groom's father. I walked to the microphone, feeling hundreds of eyes turned toward me. My heart wasn't racing, it was steady, precise. The same rhythm I'd felt before every major inspection, right before revealing a structural flaw no one wanted to admit. "Good evening," I began. "Traditionally, this is the part where I offer blessings and stories from childhood. but I'm afraid this won't be a traditional speech. A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. Lucas, I said, turning toward my son, I need 10 minutes. Alone. He frowned. Dad, not now. Now, I said quietly, please. Alina gripped his arm. He's trying to ruin this, she whispered loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. This can't wait. I continued, voice calm but firm. What I'm about to show you changes everything. The room fell silent. The DJ froze. Forks stopped clinking. Lucas looked from her to me, confusion tightening his face. 10 minutes, he said finally. Alina tried to stand, but I raised a hand. Just us, Alina. This conversation is between father and son. She's my wife now, she protested. For now, I said. Gasps. Lucas swallowed hard, then nodded. All right, Dad. Let's talk. We walked into a side hallway lined with framed photographs of past weddings, smiling couples frozen in borrowed joy. At the end was a small library, quiet and empty. I closed the door behind us. Dad, Lucas began sharply, whatever this is, it's not the time. It's exactly the time, I said, placing the folder on the table. And you'll understand why. He crossed his arms. 10 minutes. I opened the folder to the first document, Kevin Morse's signed statement. Do you know this name? He shook his head. Your wife's first husband, I said. Lucas blinked. That's not possible. She told me she's never been married. Read, I said simply. He skimmed the pages. I watched the color drain from his face. The signature, the dates, the settlement numbers, undeniable. This could be fake, he muttered. Then call him. I pushed my phone across the table. He'll answer. He's waiting. He didn't reach for it. There's more, I said, opening to the next section. Photos slid across the table, Alina and Adrian Cole outside restaurants, hotels, and parking garages. That's him, I said. The man she's really with. They've been meeting for months. Lucas shook his head slowly. No, you're wrong. These could be. Dated and time-stamped, I interrupted. Taken 3 days ago. He stared at one photo of her laughing with Adrian, her hand on his. I can't. He stopped speaking. I opened the final folder. You don't have to take my word for it. I played the audio. Alina's voice filled the quiet room, unmistakable, confident, cold. 10 more weeks of this charade, she said. Then the prenup activates. The father's a problem, but I've isolated the son. He won't believe him. Adrian's laughter followed, then hers. Lucas's shoulders slumped. He sat down slowly, hands shaking. That's her voice, he whispered. That's her voice. Yes. She said I actually believe she loves me. His voice broke on the last word. I said nothing. He looked up at me, eyes wide, stunned. What do I do? Decide if you want to keep pretending, I said softly, or end it before it takes everything. He stood abruptly, breathing hard. End it. We walked back into the ballroom together. The room quieted instantly. Alina's smile faltered when she saw his expression. Lucas, she asked, voice trembling slightly. He stopped 3 feet from her. The wedding's over. Gasps spread through the room. Someone dropped a glass. What she said, laughing nervously. Don't be ridiculous. He didn't answer. Lucas, he's lying. He's jealous. I heard your voice, he said, cutting her off. The recordings, the meetings, the lies. Color drained from her face. You planned this, he continued. Every part of it. You even called our marriage a charade. Out of context, she stammered. You don't understand. What context makes I've isolated the son sound innocent? The room was silent. Finally, she turned to me, fury twisting her face. You ruined my life. No, I said. You built this collapse yourself. Security arrived quietly, sensing the chaos. Lucas handed her the wedding ring. You can keep the dress, he said. It's the only thing you ever paid for. We walked out together. Behind us, the guests whispered, phones recording the perfect public ending for a private scheme. Outside, the air felt colder, cleaner. Lucas stood in silence beside the car, then exhaled. I should have believed you sooner. You believed me when it mattered, I said. He nodded, eyes wet but steady. What happens now? Now, I said, starting the engine, we build something real. As we drove away from the country club, the sound of applause, awkward, confused, and distant, faded behind us. For the first time in months, I felt the kind of silence I used to love. Not suspicion, not fear, just peace, the sound of a foundation finally holding again. The morning after the wedding collapse made the headlines. Not in the tabloids, but in whispers the kind that travel faster. Bride exposed mid-reception. Prenup fraud revealed. Neighbors who had ignored me for years suddenly remembered how to wave. Lucas stayed with me for a week. He barely spoke the first 2 days. The shock sat heavy on him, silent but visible. I let him heal the way I'd learned buildings heal after fire, quietly, layer by layer. On the 3rd day, he came into the kitchen holding a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. I listened to the recording again, he said. Every word. She planned everything. She did, I said. But you stopped it before she finished. He nodded slowly. Patricia called. She said there'll be legal action. Alina's not going to let this end quietly. She'll file something, I said. That's her pattern. When the performance fails, she shifts to paperwork. And she did. 3 days later, a courier dropped off a lawsuit defamation interference with marital contract emotional distress. The irony almost made me laugh. Patricia met us in her office, calm as always. Don't worry, she said. This isn't a threat, it's leverage. She's trying to salvage money or sympathy. Lucas frowned. She can't win, can she? Not with what we have, Patricia replied, tapping the thick binder labeled The Truth August 16. The recordings, the ex-husbands, the surveillance. We're not just defending, we're counterfiling for fraud and attempted extortion. Lucas stared at the floor. I still can't believe I didn't see it. She's made a career out of being invisible until it's too late, Patricia said. You're not the first, but you can be the last. The hearing was scheduled for late September. In the meantime, Alina disappeared from public view. Adrian Cole quit his firm within a week. Rumor said he'd moved to California. But her attorney, a polished man named Greer, was relentless. He filed motions, delayed discovery, tried to paint Lucas as a spiteful ex. Patricia met every move with precision. We'll let them talk, she said. And when they're finished, we'll show the recordings. The day of the hearing arrived cold and gray. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant truth's usual perfume. Lucas and I sat side by side, silent but steady. Across the aisle, Alina entered in a navy suit, no wedding ring. Her face was pale, her expression rehearsed. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The case title sounded strange in the clerk's voice, Cross versus Hale. The irony wasn't lost on me, she was still fighting for control even with a fake name. Greer opened confidently. My client was humiliated publicly by false allegations made without proof. She was defamed in front of hundreds of witnesses. Patricia didn't interrupt. She let him build his illusion. Then she stood. Your Honor, she said evenly. We agree my clients made a public statement, but not a false one. The evidence will show that the plaintiff, Ms. Cross, concealed prior marriages, engaged in deceit, and entered this union under fraudulent pretenses. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have evidence. Patricia gestured to the clerk. Exhibit A. She handed over a transcript, the same one from the hotel recording. The judge began to read. The courtroom stayed silent, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. When he reached the line, the father's a problem, but I've isolated the son. Alina's face hardened. Patricia continued. Exhibit B, sworn statements from her 2 prior husbands confirming identical behavior manipulation prenups, financial extraction. Greer objected relevance character whatever he could. The judge overruled. It goes to intent. Proceed. Patricia laid out the rest like a blueprint, timelines, wire transfers, photographs, and the prenup itself drafted months before the engagement. By the time she finished, Greer's confidence had drained. Alina sat motionless, staring at the table. Finally, the judge spoke. Miss Cross, do you deny this evidence? Alina hesitated. Her voice was smaller now. It's all twisted, taken out of context. Then explain the context, the judge said. She didn't answer. Silence filled the room. Patricia closed her binder gently. Your Honor, we're seeking dismissal of her claims and request referral to the district attorney for potential criminal investigation fraud and attempted coercion. The judge nodded. Motion granted. This court will refer the case to the DA. He looked at Alina. I suggest you retain different counsel. The gavel struck once final as thunder. Lucas exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. Outside the courthouse, he leaned against the stone railing and said quietly, "It's over." "Not entirely," I said, "but the structure's down. The rest is cleanup." He looked at me with a faint smile. "You always talk like an engineer." "Architect," I corrected. "Engineers fix, architects prevent." He laughed, the first genuine laugh since before the engagement. In the weeks that followed, Alina vanished from Oregon. Rumor placed her in Arizona under another name. The district attorney opened a preliminary investigation, but she was gone before the summons arrived. Lucas started rebuilding his life slowly. He went back to work, moved into a small apartment near the river, and began therapy. I helped him repaint the place one weekend. The smell of fresh paint filled the air, and for once it didn't feel like covering damage, it felt like starting clean. One evening, while packing tools, he said I still hear her voice sometimes, not literally, but in my head. The way she said, "We're a family now," it sounded so real. "It was real to you," I said. "That's what she stole. Not money belief. But belief can be rebuilt, too." He nodded. "How did you stay calm through all of it?" I smiled faintly. Blueprints. I treated it like any failing structure: find the weak point, reinforce, remove the rot, rebuild stronger. He laughed quietly. "You make revenge sound like construction." "It is," I said, "except the goal isn't destruction, it's restoration." A month later, Patricia called. "You'll want to hear this," she said. She forwarded an email from the district attorney's office. Case 24-1976, Cross Alina. Warrant issued for financial fraud and false representation. I sat back in my chair, the house around me silent as always. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it knocks softly and lets you breathe again. That night I poured 2 glasses of wine, one for me, one for Nora, the wife who'd never see this ending. I placed her photo on the table and said, "It's done. Our boy's free." Outside, the autumn wind moved through the garden, carrying away the last of the summer petals, the same garden Alina had once called a perfect inheritance. Now it was just a garden again, quiet, unclaimed, whole. Lucas called later. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe I'll start my own firm, smaller project, sustainable housing, the kind you used to design." I smiled. "That's a good idea." He hesitated. "Would you help me draw the first plans?" I looked at the blueprints on my own desk, the life I'd rebuilt piece by piece, and said, "Always." For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of watching something collapse. I felt the peace of seeing something new rise where the ruins had been. Because revenge, I realized, wasn't about destroying her. It was about rebuilding what she tried to erase: truth, trust, and legacy. The house creaked softly in the wind, old wood settling. I listened to it the way I used to listen for flaws. Only this time I didn't hear any. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.